The city lights shimmered against the rain-soaked pavement as Michael Reed, a billionaire known for his empire and silence, walked alone. His polished shoes splashed through puddles, but he didn't care. Every night he took the same route, the street where his wife used to hand out blankets to the homeless before she died in that crash 3 years ago. He had everything, except her. The world saw power, he only felt emptiness. But tonight, something changed. A little girl tugged on his sleeve, pointing toward a woman sitting by the lamppost, wrapped in torn fabric and sorrow. "Sir," the child said softly, "that lady, she looks like Mommy." Michael froze. His breath caught. Slowly, he turned. The woman lifted her head. Even through the dirt, the exhaustion, the dim light, he saw them. Those same eyes. Those same impossible, unforgettable eyes. "Before we dive deeper, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? It amazes me how far a single story can travel. Drop your city below, let's see how wide kindness still spreads." Michael's pulse raced. No. It couldn't be. His wife, Grace, was gone, buried, mourned, and turned into photographs he could barely look at anymore. But the woman by the lamppost, the shape of her face, the trembling of her hands, everything screamed her. He stepped forward cautiously, as if afraid she'd vanish if he moved too fast. "Excuse me," he murmured, his voice cracking like glass. The woman flinched, her eyes darting up in fear. "Please, I don't have anything left to give," she whispered. He paused, studying her face. It wasn't just resemblance, it was recognition. Grace! The name escaped him before he could stop it. Her lips parted. A soft gasp. "No one's called me that in years," she said, almost in disbelief. The rain thickened, coating both of them in silver mist. The little girl, maybe 6 years old, wearing mismatched gloves, looked between them, confused but curious. "Do you know my mommy?" she asked. Michael's heart twisted. He crouched down to the girl's level. "What's your name?" "Ava," she replied proudly. "Mom says Daddy's gone to heaven, but she talks to him every night." He looked back at the woman, Grace, or whoever she was, and saw tears welling up. She turned away, ashamed. "Please," she said quietly, "just go. You shouldn't see me like this." But he couldn't. His instinct screamed to walk away, to protect his sanity, yet his heart, the same broken heart that had never healed, dragged him closer. "You remind me of someone," he said gently. "Someone I loved more than life." The woman's shoulders trembled. "Then forget her," she replied hoarsely. "Because she's gone. Like I should be." For a long moment, silence filled the space between them. The rain drummed softly on metal and concrete, echoing the hollow ache of years lost. "Come with me," Michael said finally. "At least for tonight. There's warmth, food, and answers I think we both need." She hesitated, then nodded, defeated. Ava smiled faintly, clutching her mother's torn sleeve. Together, they walked toward the street where his black car waited, engine humming quietly like a sleeping beast. As the city blurred behind them, Michael couldn't stop looking at her reflection in the window, the reflection of a ghost he thought he'd buried, now sitting alive beside him. And for the first time in years, he whispered, barely audible, "If this is a dream, don't wake me up." The car ride was silent, heavy with memories neither dared to name. Streetlights flickered across Grace's face, or the woman who looked like her, painting her in shifting tones of gold and shadow. Ava slept curled against her mother's lap, her tiny hand still clutching the hem of her coat. Michael couldn't take his eyes off her. Every blink felt like a test. If he looked away, would she still be there when he looked back? "You're staring," she murmured, without meeting his gaze. He swallowed hard. "I'm trying to understand." Her lips curved faintly, but the smile was broken. "There's nothing to understand. Life breaks people differently." He hesitated, fingers tightening on the steering wheel. "Where do you stay?" "Nowhere," she whispered. "Everywhere." He exhaled slowly, pain threading through the sound. "No one should have to live like that." She shrugged. "Some of us don't get to choose anymore." When they reached his penthouse, she froze at the entrance. The marble floors, the soft lights, the scent of warmth, it all felt like another world. Ava blinked awake and gasped softly. "Mommy, are we in a castle?" Grace, or the woman who might be her, smiled tenderly. "No, baby. Just someone's home." Michael gestured quietly. "You both are safe here tonight. Take a shower, eat, rest." But she shook her head. "We don't take charity." "It's not charity," he said softly. "It's humanity." That word struck her. For a moment, the hardness in her eyes melted, replaced by something fragile, something painfully familiar. She nodded slowly. In the kitchen, Michael prepared something simple: soup, bread, and warm milk. He hadn't cooked for anyone since Grace died. The smell of simmering broth filled the space with a strange nostalgia, like a ghost visiting kindly this time. When he placed the bowl before her, she stared at it as if it were treasure. "You made this yourself?" He nodded. "Old habits." She smiled faintly. "She taught you well, whoever she was." His throat tightened. "Yeah, she did." For a while, no one spoke. Ava ate happily, crumbs on her cheeks, humming to herself. The woman, her mother, watched her with the kind of quiet love only someone who's lost too much could give. Then she looked up and whispered, "Why are you helping us?" Michael paused. The truth was simple, he didn't know. Maybe it was guilt, or longing, or the ache of recognizing something that shouldn't exist anymore. "Because I couldn't help her," he said softly. "Not in time." She lowered her gaze. "You loved her deeply, didn't you?" He nodded. "Still do." For the first time, her hand reached out, hesitant, trembling, and rested on his for just a second. It was enough to make the air between them hum with something unspeakable. "If you were there in that moment," the narrator's voice softened, "what would you have done? Be honest, comment your answer below. And if words fail you, just hit like to prove that compassion still matters." Later that night, Ava slept peacefully in the guest room. The woman sat by the window, wrapped in one of his blankets, staring at the city far below. Michael approached quietly, holding 2 mugs of tea. "You should rest," he said gently. "I can't. Not in places like this." He frowned. "Why not?" She looked at him, and for the first time, he saw pain that wasn't fear, but memory. "Because I used to live like this. I had a husband, a home, a life. Until the night the car crashed." Michael's breath froze. The air grew heavier. She turned away. "They told me he died instantly. And that I should have too. Maybe I did, just not the way people think." He couldn't speak. Every piece of logic shattered under the weight of her words. The scar he'd seen earlier, faint beneath her jaw, he'd kissed that same spot once before, on the night of their anniversary. "Grace," he whispered. Her eyes met his, full of sorrow. "You shouldn't say that name anymore. It belongs to a past that doesn't fit this world." He shook his head, trembling. "But it's you. I know it's you." She stood, shaking slightly. "Michael, the dead don't come back. I'm just someone who wears her face." "Then why do I feel her in every word you say?" His voice broke. She stepped back, tears brimming. "Because maybe part of her still remembers you." He wanted to reach for her, to hold her, to demand answers, but something in her eyes stopped him. It wasn't rejection. It was fear. "What happened to you?" he asked, almost whispering. Her answer came barely above a breath. "The world happened." Outside, thunder rolled across the skyline. Inside, 2 souls stood on opposite sides of a truth too painful to touch, yet too alive to ignore. The storm outside pressed against the glass, a low rumble echoing through the penthouse as if the heavens themselves listened in silence. Michael stood a few steps away, afraid that if he blinked, she would vanish again. Grace, or the woman who carried her ghost, sat by the window, the city's glow outlining her frail silhouette. "I remember fire," she whispered suddenly. "Screaming metal. The smell of gasoline." Her eyes unfocused, lost in a memory that still burned behind her lids. "They said I was lucky to survive. But when I woke up, my face wasn't the same. The surgeries, they changed me. Even I couldn't recognize myself anymore." Michael's heart clenched. "Why didn't you come home?" A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "Home? I didn't have one. You were declared dead. Everything was gone. The house, the company, even the people who once called themselves friends. He took a step closer. I would have found you. She looked up sharply. You didn't even look. The words hit harder than thunder. He'd buried himself in work, in wealth, in hollow distractions, because facing her absence had been too unbearable. He had built towers of glass to hide a heart made of ashes. You're right, he said, voice trembling. I couldn't face the wreckage. Her eyes softened, but the pain lingered. And I couldn't face the mirror. He sank onto the sofa opposite her, the distance between them filled with ghosts and guilt. What about Ava? He asked gently. She glanced toward the door where her daughter slept. She was born after the crash. I didn't even know I was pregnant until the hospital told me. They said I wouldn't survive if I kept her, but I couldn't lose another life. So I chose hers over mine. Tears slipped down her cheeks, glistening like the raindrops on the glass behind her. Michael whispered, You saved her. I tried, she murmured. Every day since, I've tried. Sometimes by begging, sometimes by cleaning, sometimes by praying to a God I'm not sure hears me anymore. Silence. Only the sound of the rain, steady and soft, filling the spaces words couldn't reach. Michael leaned forward, his voice a breath. Have you ever had someone help you when no one else would? Write yes and tell me their name. Maybe gratitude can travel further than we think. She exhaled shakily. When the hospital discharged me, I had nowhere to go. Then an old nurse, Mrs. Palmer, found me sleeping behind the church. She gave me food, a coat, and a small cross necklace. Said I'd need faith more than money. Grace touched the chain around her neck. It shimmered faintly in the dim light. That's all I've had since then. Faith and Ava. Michael reached across the table, his hand hesitating inches from hers. You don't have to keep surviving alone. Her voice broke. You don't know what it's like out there, Michael. People see your worth by the dirt on your hands, not the love in your heart. He closed the gap, his fingers brushing hers. Then let me see it differently. Let me try again. She looked into his eyes, and for a fleeting moment, the years between them disappeared. But then Ava's soft cry came from the guest room, and the fragile connection broke. Grace stood, wiping her tears. I should check on her. When she disappeared down the hall, Michael pressed his palms to his face. The ache in his chest wasn't just grief anymore, it was awakening. Hope. And fear of what that hope might cost. He walked to the fireplace, gazing at a photo resting on the mantel, his late wife, smiling, her eyes alight with laughter. The resemblance was undeniable. He turned it face down, whispering to the empty room, If this is really you, Grace, why does it hurt to believe again? He barely heard the footsteps return until she stood behind him, quiet and trembling. Thank you, she said softly. For tonight. For not treating me like I was invisible. He turned to face her. You're not invisible. You never were. Her lips trembled. Then why do I still feel like a shadow? Because the light hasn't touched you in a long time, he replied. She blinked back tears. Maybe it shouldn't. It should, he whispered, his hand lifting, almost touching her face before he stopped himself. It always should. For a long moment, neither spoke. The rain eased outside, replaced by the faint hum of dawn creeping up the skyline. Grace looked toward the soft light breaking through the clouds. Maybe tomorrow, Ava and I will find a place of our own again. Somewhere small, but safe. Michael's voice was gentle, almost pleading. You already have one. She met his eyes, and the truth that lingered there, raw, unspoken, terrifying, was enough to make her step back again. Don't, she whispered. Please don't make promises to ghosts. He wanted to tell her she wasn't one. He wanted to scream that she was home. But all he could do was watch as she turned toward the door of the guest room, disappearing into the soft light of morning. By morning, the rain had stopped, leaving the world washed clean and glistening. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, brushing across the quiet penthouse like a gentle apology. The smell of coffee filled the air, strong, familiar, comforting. Michael stood in the kitchen, watching as Ava sat at the table, swinging her legs, humming softly while eating toast. Grace joined her, wearing one of the spare shirts he'd left for her. It was too big, but somehow she looked peaceful for the first time. Still, the way she avoided his eyes told him the peace was temporary, a borrowed breath in a life that had forgotten how to rest. "You cooked again," she said softly, taking a seat across from him. He smiled faintly. "Old habits die hard." Ava giggled. "Mommy, can we stay here forever?" The question hung in the air like fragile glass. Grace froze, her fingers tightening on the cup she held. "No, sweetheart," she said gently. "We can't stay where we don't belong." Michael's chest tightened. "Maybe belonging isn't about where you're allowed," he said quietly. "Maybe it's about where someone wants you." Grace's gaze lifted, uncertain, wounded. "Wanting and deserving are not the same, Michael." He leaned forward, his tone steady. "Then let me prove you deserve both." She said nothing, but something in her eyes flickered, a crack of belief she didn't want to show. That afternoon, he took them both out. No chauffeur, no headlines, no tinted windows, just a man, a woman, and a child walking through the city like any other family. They bought street food, watched pigeons in the park, and laughed softly when Ava tried to feed one with 2 big pieces of bread. For once, Grace smiled without pain. Michael watched her quietly, mimeizing it, afraid it might vanish with the sunset. When they passed a beggar boy sitting by a fountain, shivering and barefoot, Ava stopped. "Mommy, he's cold." Grace knelt beside her daughter, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Then what do we do, Ava?" Ava thought for a moment, then slipped off her small scarf and wrapped it around the boy's shoulders. "Now he's not," she said proudly. Michael felt his throat tighten. He looked at Grace, who was smiling through tears. "She's got your heart," he whispered. Grace nodded, her voice trembling. "It's all I had left to give her." "Now it's your turn," the narrator's voice warmed softly. "Share one small good thing you did recently. Write it below so others remember that humanity still lives. Your story might light someone's path tonight." As they continued walking, Grace's step slowed. "You shouldn't have brought us out," she murmured. "Someone will recognize you." He shrugged lightly. "Let them. Maybe they'll finally see what matters." She shook her head, smiling sadly. "That's easy for a man like you to say. You live above the clouds. People like me don't even get to see the sky." He stopped walking. "Then I'll bring the sky down to you." She turned toward him, startled. "Why are you doing this?" He looked at her for a long time before answering. "Because I lost everything once, and I won't make the same mistake twice." The words hung heavy between them. She wanted to believe him. But belief had burned her before. They reached the riverside. The air smelled of wet stone and morning wind. Ava ran ahead, chasing the reflection of sunlight on the water. Grace and Michael stood side by side, watching her laughter ripple through the air like music. "Sometimes," Grace said softly, "I dream of what it would have been like if that crash never happened. If we still had a home, a life, maybe even more children." Michael's voice dropped to a whisper. "Then maybe this is our second chance." She turned to him slowly, her eyes shining but uncertain. "Do you really believe that?" He nodded. "With everything I have left." She stared at him, not with the disbelief of a stranger, but the heartbreak of someone who remembered how it used to feel to be loved that deeply. "You talk like you've forgiven me," she said. "But you don't even know what I've done." "I don't need to," he replied. "I just know who you are." Her voice trembled. "And who am I?" He stepped closer, his words barely audible. "The woman I prayed to see again." Grace's eyes filled with tears. She wanted to turn away, to protect herself, but something in him, something raw, familiar, unbreakable, held her there. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. "Maybe not," he said gently. "But sometimes love shows up even when we don't deserve it." Her breath hitched. For the first time since that night years ago, she didn't argue. As Ava's laughter echoed down the riverside, Grace looked at Michael and whispered, maybe tomorrow we'll stay one more day." Michael smiled softly, his chest aching with quiet relief. That's all I need. And for a moment, it felt like the world had given them permission to start again. The next morning was quieter than usual. A strange kind of calm had settled over the penthouse, the kind that feels too perfect, like the air before a storm. Grace stood by the window again, watching the city come alive below. Ava was still asleep, bundled in soft blankets that smelled of warmth and safety. For once, her daughter looked like any other child, not one who had spent nights shivering under cardboard roofs. Michael approached quietly, carrying 2 mugs of tea. "Didn't sleep again?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Sleep feels like a luxury I forgot how to earn." He set a mug beside her. "Then maybe it's time you remembered." Grace wrapped her fingers around the cup, savoring the heat. "You talk like it's that easy." "Sometimes it is," he replied gently. "Sometimes it starts with just staying." She looked at him then, really looked, and for the first time, she didn't see the billionaire everyone else did. She saw the man who once laughed until sunrise, the man who kissed her knuckles and said forever like he meant it. Her voice came soft. "Michael, if I told you the truth, you'd never look at me the same again." He frowned, confused. "The truth about what?" She took a deep breath. "About that night. The crash." Michael froze. Every nerve in his body went still. "What about it?" Grace's eyes glistened. "It wasn't an accident." The words hit like a blade. "What do you mean?" She turned away, tears falling freely now. "I was driving. You told me not to, remember? I was angry, about the charity fund, about the dinner, about everything. I just wanted to get away for a moment. You followed me out, and She stopped, her voice cracking. "I didn't see the light. I ran it. And the car that hit us." Michael's breath broke. "You were driving?" She nodded slowly, shame twisting her expression. "You took the blame in the papers because they thought the body in the driver's seat was you. They never found me because I crawled out before it burned. I lived, but I didn't deserve to." He stepped back, the world tilting beneath him. All those years of grief, all the pain, the therapy, the sleepless nights, now turned upside down by the one person who could have ended them years ago. "You let me mourn you," he said hoarsely. "You watched me drown in it." "I couldn't face you," she whispered. "Every time I tried, I saw the fire again. I saw what I'd done." He stared at her, disbelief and heartbreak tearing through him. "You were alive all this time?" "I wanted to come back," she cried, "but I thought you'd hate me." He turned away, running a trembling hand through his hair. "Hate you? Grace, I would have traded everything just to have you breathe again." Her sob broke the silence. "Then why does it feel like I've ruined that too?" He faced her again, eyes wet but steady. "Because you kept a truth that could have saved us both." She reached for him, desperate. "I didn't mean to, Michael. I didn't know how to live with what I did." He stepped back, shaking his head, torn between fury and love. "You think I do? Every night I begged for a miracle, and when it finally came, it broke me all over again." Her voice trembled. "Then what do I do now?" He closed his eyes. "Start by not running anymore." The silence that followed was unbearable. Ava's soft humming from the next room was the only thing anchoring them to the world. Grace wiped her tears and whispered, "If that moment hit you hard, leave a red heart hash. Sometimes one little symbol says what our hearts can't." Michael exhaled, sitting heavily on the couch. His chest ached with too many years of love and too few of forgiveness. Finally, he spoke, quietly, like a man who had walked through fire and still somehow found light. "You didn't ruin everything, Grace. You made a mistake. A terrible one. But I made one too. I stopped believing in second chances." Her tears came faster now. "You'd still give me one?" He nodded slowly. "Maybe that's the only way we both heal." She sat beside him cautiously, her hands trembling as she rested them in her lap. "I don't know how to be that woman anymore." He looked at her, eyes soft. "Then be the one you are now. Maybe that's who I was supposed to find." Outside, the sky began to clear, pale blue stretching through the clouds like hope reclaiming space. Grace leaned against the window, letting the light wash over her, as if forgiving herself a little for the first time. Michael reached out, brushing a tear from her cheek. "We can't change the past," he whispered, "but we can stop letting it own us." She met his gaze, fragile but determined. "Then maybe we start there." And for the first time in years, Michael smiled, not because the pain was gone, but because she was still here to feel it with him. The following days moved like fragile glass, every moment careful, every word measured. Grace stayed in the guest room, though Michael could feel her presence everywhere. Her laughter, once lost to time, now echoed faintly through the halls whenever Ava giggled. It was strange how something as small as a child's laughter could begin to stitch a man's heart back together. Yet beneath that warmth, tension brewed like a quiet storm. The truth still lingered between them, sharp, unresolved. One night, Michael found her standing on the balcony, arms wrapped around herself, staring at the city lights below. The wind tugged at her hair, carrying the faint scent of rain. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said softly. She didn't turn. "I used to watch from this high once," she murmured. "Back when we had everything. It's funny, it all looks smaller now." He stepped closer. "Maybe you just learned what actually matters." She smiled sadly. "You mean guilt?" He shook his head. "I mean grace." She turned at that, the word hitting her like a whisper from the past. "Don't say that name like it still belongs to me." "It always will." Her eyes filled. "Michael, I drove that car. I took everything from you." He nodded slowly. "You did. And yet here you are, standing in front of me, asking for nothing but a chance to keep breathing. Maybe that's enough." She took a shaky breath. "I don't know if I can forgive myself." He moved closer, his voice barely above the wind. "Then let me do it for both of us." She stared at him, stunned. "You'd forgive that? After all those years?" His eyes were steady, raw with pain and truth. "I already have. Holding on to hate didn't bring you back, maybe letting go will let me keep you this time." Her knees gave way, and he caught her before she fell. Tears spilled freely down her cheeks, dampening his shirt as he held her close. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. He pressed his forehead to hers. "Maybe forgiveness isn't about deserving. Maybe it's about surviving." For a long while, they just stood there, two souls who had spent too long apart, now trembling in the fragile quiet of a second chance neither thought possible. The night wind softened around them, almost tender, as if the city itself exhaled in relief. "Be honest," the narrator's voice broke the silence gently. "Could you forgive after what they did? Type forgive if you could, or never if it would break you too deeply." Grace pulled back slightly, wiping her eyes. "Michael, I don't know how to move forward from this." He gave a small smile. "Then we take it one heartbeat at a time." She laughed weakly. "You always had a way of making impossible things sound easy. And you always had a way of making broken things worth fixing." For a moment, something old and beautiful sparked between them, the same quiet connection that had once been love, now weathered but still alive. "Does Ava know?" Michael asked softly. Grace shook her head. "No. I never told her about you. I didn't want her to grow up chasing ghosts." "Then maybe it's time she met her father," he said quietly. Her breath caught. "You really mean that?" He nodded, his hand brushing a tear from her cheek. "She deserves the truth, and so do you." Her eyes widened, trembling. "But what if she hates me for lying?" "She won't," he whispered. "Because she's your daughter. And she's got your heart." The first stars began to break through the clouds above them. Grace leaned into his chest, her voice breaking. "You still sound like the man I loved. And you still look like the reason I became one." She smiled through her tears, resting her head against him. For the first time, she let herself breathe fully, no pretending, no running. Just breathing. Below them, the city shimmered, alive, vast, forgiving. Michael held her tighter. "No more ghosts," he murmured. "No more hiding. Tomorrow, we tell her everything." Grace nodded slowly. "Tomorrow," she whispered. And though neither said it aloud, they both knew that tomorrow could change everything again, for better or for heartbreak. But at least now, they would face it together. The morning sun crept gently into the room, painting the walls gold. For the first time in years, Michael woke to the sound of laughter, soft, innocent, alive. He found Grace and Ava in the kitchen, the little girl standing on a stool, stirring pancake batter while Grace guided her hands. The sight was so ordinary, so heartbreakingly human, that it almost didn't feel real. Grace looked up when she saw him. "Good morning," she said softly. He smiled, still half-dazed. "You two look perfect." Ava beamed. "We're making breakfast. Mommy says pancakes mean happy days." Michael's throat tightened. "Then I guess this is one." They ate together like a family that had never broken, laughter in between bites, sunlight pouring over them like forgiveness made visible. For a moment, everything painful seemed far away. But deep down, both adults knew what was coming. The truth had to be told. After breakfast, Grace took Ava to the park across the street. Michael followed quietly, letting the two of them walk ahead. Watching Grace hold Ava's hand, seeing how the child's curls bounced as she skipped, felt like watching life itself heal right in front of him. At the swings, Ava called out, "Mommy, push me higher." Grace laughed and obliged, her laughter carrying on the breeze, light, full, free. Michael joined them slowly, sitting on the nearby bench. When Grace caught his eyes, he nodded. It was time. "Sweetheart," Grace said gently, stopping the swing. "There's something Mommy needs to tell you." Ava tilted her head. "What is it?" Grace's voice trembled. "You remember how I told you your daddy was in heaven?" The little girl nodded. Grace knelt before her, tears already threatening to fall. "I was wrong, baby. He's here. He's been here all along." Ava frowned, confused. Then she turned toward Michael, who was now kneeling beside her. "Hey, kiddo," he said softly. "I'm your dad." For a second, she didn't move, just stared at him with wide, searching eyes. Then, slowly, she reached out and touched his face, her tiny fingers brushing against his cheek. "You feel real," she whispered. He smiled through tears. "I am real." And then she threw her arms around his neck. "Daddy!" Michael held her close, shaking as years of silence, pain, and loneliness melted away in that single word. Grace covered her mouth, sobbing quietly, overwhelmed by the moment she thought she'd never live to see. Ava leaned back slightly, her face glowing. "You're not going away, right?" He shook his head, eyes shining. "Never again." Grace stood behind them, tears glistening like jewels. For once, her heart didn't ache, it swelled. Watching the two most precious parts of her world finally meet felt like a wound closing. A passerby paused to smile at them. The world, for that small instant, seemed softer. "If you believe love still wins," the narrator's voice rose warmly, commenting, "Let's fill this section with hope, maybe someone scrolling right now needs to see it." Later that evening, back at the penthouse, the three of them watched the sunset from the balcony. Ava fell asleep on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, her hands still clutching a small pancake she'd insisted on saving. Grace stood beside Michael, her eyes on the horizon. "She looks so peaceful," she whispered. "She has your calm," he said. Grace smiled faintly. "And your stubbornness." He chuckled softly. "That's a dangerous combination." She turned to him, her voice quieter now. "Do you think we can really do this? Start over?" He looked at her for a long time before answering. "I don't think we have to start over. I think we just have to keep going, together." The wind tugged gently at her hair, carrying the scent of jasmine and rain. "You make it sound easy again," she murmured. He reached for her hand. "Maybe it's not supposed to be easy. Maybe it's just supposed to be worth it." She stared at their joined hands, worn, scarred, imperfect, and nodded slowly. "Then I'm ready to try." The city lights began to flicker below, reflections dancing in their eyes like tiny stars. Grace leaned her head on his shoulder, and for a while, they simply watched the night arrive. Neither spoke, but everything that needed to be said had already been written in that quiet, the apology, the forgiveness, the promise. And as the sky deepened into twilight, it wasn't tragedy that filled the air anymore. It was hope. Night fell softly over the city, the kind of night that didn't feel heavy, just quiet, thoughtful. The penthouse lights were dim, golden, wrapping the room in warmth. Ava was asleep on the couch, one arm tucked under her cheek, the other clutching the small stuffed bear Michael had bought her earlier that day. Grace stood near the window, gazing out at the skyline that had once belonged to her past and was now slowly forgiving her. Michael joined her, carrying 2 cups of tea, setting one beside her. "She looks like you when she sleeps," he said quietly. Grace smiled faintly. "She has your stubborn jawline. I see it every time she argues with me." He chuckled softly, the sound low and warm. "Then she's definitely ours." They stood in silence for a while, listening to the hum of the city below. Grace exhaled, a long, trembling breath. "I used to pray that if I ever saw you again, you'd look at me with kindness, not anger. But I never imagined this." Michael's voice was calm. "What do you see now?" She turned to him, her eyes glistening. "A man who should hate me, but doesn't. A man who could have walked away, but stayed." He met her gaze, his words soft but steady. "A man who finally understands that losing you wasn't punishment, it was preparation. So that if life ever gave me a second chance, I'd know how to hold on this time." Grace swallowed hard, tears breaking free again. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to," he murmured. "You're here. That's enough." They watched the sky together, the stars faint through the glow of the city, but still there, still trying. "I don't know what tomorrow looks like," Grace whispered. "But for the first time, I'm not scared of it." Michael reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining naturally, as if remembering the shape they once held. "Then let's face it together, fear and all." A faint smile touched her lips. "You really believe people like us get to have happy endings?" He shook his head gently. "No. But we get something better, a true one." Her tears fell again, but this time they weren't from pain. They were release. She rested her head on his shoulder, eyes closed, heart steady. "Thank you for finding me," she whispered. He smiled sadly. "You weren't lost, Grace. Just waiting to be seen again." The city lights flickered in her eyes like constellations, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe in something fragile, something beautiful. If this story moved you, the narrator's voice spoke softly, don't scroll past quietly. Tap like, not for me, but for the soul who carried this pain and still stayed kind. One click can be your way of saying, I felt you. Grace turned, looking back at Ava, her sleeping daughter safe at last. She's going to have a better life now, she said quietly. We both will. Michael nodded. Because this time, we're building it with what really matters. And what's that? Forgiveness, he said, smiling faintly. And love that didn't die, it just waited. She laughed softly, a real laugh, one that made him close his eyes for a moment just to hear it. You always knew how to end things perfectly, she teased. He grinned. Maybe it's not an ending. Maybe it's just the beginning we never got right. Grace looked at him for a long moment, her heart full, her soul finally quiet. Then let's begin, she whispered. Michael leaned in, pressing his forehead against hers, the city fading behind them, the world slowing down. Just two people, broken but breathing, forgiven and found. Outside, dawn began to touch the horizon again, golden light spilling gently into the room, wrapping them in something neither wealth nor time could ever buy, peace. And as the first morning of their new life rose over the city, Grace whispered into the quiet, we made it. Michael's arm tightened around her, his voice low. We always were going to. The light grew stronger, filling every corner, every shadow, and somewhere within it, love found its way home again.